Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the North Affair Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Happy New Year to everyone. Now, um, I hope everybody had a good time last night. I hope you used your common sense and didn't drink and drive. There's no excuse. You can take a taxi, call a friend, take transit, call an Uber to get around safely and get home safely. Here we are, start of a brand new year, 2026. Deeply affordable housing ignored. We're going to talk about a book that should have changed the national conversation on housing. Gregor Gregory's Our Crumbling Foundation. It lays out 37 concrete, evidence-based recommendations to fix Canada's housing system. And here's the truth. There is no public record of the federal or provincial governments implementing them. Not one. No progress tracker, no adoption list, no accountability. The book offers a roadmap, and governments haven't even opened the map. But this isn't about the book. It's about the vacuum of action around it. It's about governments refusing to engage with solutions. So, what this book actually does, it's not a memoir, it's not a political rant, it's not a policy blueprint. It is a policy blueprint. The 37 recommendations in this book covers deep affordability, social housing, zoning reform, tenant protections, indigenous housing, infrastructure alignment, federal provincial coordination, long-term planning, data transparency, homelessness prevention, supportive housing, climate resilient construction, municipal funding reform. Thank you for joining me. Porcupine Podcast. How you doing? Nice to have you out here. Happy New Year to you. This book, this isn't a book of ideas. It's a book of instructions. So the book and instructions how to build. So the books and instructions how to put things together. It's like when you buy something and it comes with instructions. Do you start putting the pieces together without the instructions? Because it's probably likely not going to happen. Housing is like a puzzle. We have to build it piece by piece. What the searchable public record shows, and explains the forensic reality. There's no federal progress tracker exists. No provincial progress tracker exists. No ministry has published an adoption list. No government has issued a formal response. No, no journalist has documented implementations. No policy group has tracked uptake. No public evidence shows any of the 37 recommendations being adopted. This book, Our Crumbling Foundations, is recent. If governments has implemented even one of these 37 recommendations, they would have announced it. They haven't. Now, governments claim to care about housing, but they ignore the blueprint. Back just a couple months ago, um, middle of November, mayors all across the major cities and towns calling on the provincial government to implement a state of emergency on homelessness and addiction. The provincial government didn't even do that. They talk about affordability, they talk about supply, they talk about the crisis, but they ignore the solutions. The recommendations in this book, they're practical, not ideological. They're not left or right. They're not radical. They're not experimental. They're evidence based. And governments prefer announcements over structure. The recommendations require accountability, and governments avoid measurable commitments. The recommendations require long term planning, and political cycles are short. These 37 recommendations aren't ignored because they're wrong. They're ignored because they're right and because they require governments to change how they operate. What the recommendations would actually fix: deep affordability, real rent geared to income housing, not 80% of market rent, not attainable housing, actual affordability, ending chronic homelessness, supportive housing, prevention, indigenous led housing, coordinated systems, stabilizing the rental market, tenant protections, vacancy control, anti renoviction measures, purpose built rental incentives. And we'll also be fixing the supply pipeline, zoning reform, infrastructure alignment, public land use, nonprofit and co op expansion. Real numbers, real tracking, real accountability. The 37 recommendations don't fix housing, they fix the systems that broke housing. And we can go back to the mid 80s and 90s when the federal and provincial government got out of housing entirely, passed the responsibilities down to municipalities and cities. Why governments haven't implemented them? The 37 recommendations. The recommendations require admitting failure. Governments don't like that. They require long term investment. Governments prefer short term announcements. They require coordination. Federal, provincial, municipal, all aligned governments avoid shared responsibility. They require transparency. Governments avoid measurable targets. They require shifting money from crisis management to prevention. Shelters are visible. Housing is slow. Prevention is invisible. Governments don't ignore the 37 recommendations because they're impossible. They ignore them because they're inconvenient. Our crumbling foundation, our crumbling foundation gives Canada 37 ways to fix its housing system, and there is no public record of the federal or provincial governments implementing them. Not one. That's the story, not the book, not the recommendations, the silence, the inaction, the refusal to engage with solutions that would actually work. Because the truth is simple, we don't have a shortage of ideas. We have a shortage of political will. Now, in the book, also, too, the recommendations that works best for deeply affordable housing, and based on the search results, the strongest deeply affordable housing recommendations in our crumbling foundation is expand nonprofit and co-op housing. This is the Berlin model. Why this is the top recommendation? Berlin's co-ops provide deeply affordable housing for low and middle income earners. Co-ops make up 12% of Berlin's rental stock, far higher than Canada's. We're about 5.5%. They act as a buffer against rent surges, stabilizing affordability long term. They are permanently affordable because they are not driven by profit sources. They're not driven by the market rent. This is the closest match to what Ontario needs: permanent, non market, deeply affordable homes that stay affordable. The second strongest recommendation for deep affordability: housing first. That's the Finland model. Finland's Housing First program is highlighted as a core solution in the book. Housing is unconditional, meaning if you have a mental illness, you have an addiction, we are going to offer you housing unconditionally and offer you the supports that you need. We can't help people who are in tent encampments. We could potentially start helping people who are in the shelters, but they don't stay around the shelter all day long. You're up in the morning, you get your breakfast, you're out the door. Come back in for a morning snack, coffee or tea, come back in for lunch, back out into the cold or whatever in the afternoon, and then dinner. And then anybody who doesn't have a bed for the night, you have to be back at that shelter no later than 7 p.m., or you'll miss a spot and you won't get a cot. So you can't treat people when they're in the homeless shelter system. They have to be in housing. And that's why we offer Finland's housing first model. Housing first, unconditionally, and we can start helping you. In the housing first model, units are deeply affordable. Supportive housing is integrated. Finland reduced homelessness dramatically using this model. Finland reduced their homelessness by 80%. This model directly supports people with the lowest incomes and the highest needs, which is exactly where deeply affordable housing is most critical. Third strongest, public land plus mixed use redevelopments. This is the Paris model. The book highlights Paris's approach, requiring affordable units as a condition of approval, embedding affordable housing in high value areas. This is not as deeply affordable as co ops or housing first, but it is a powerful supply side tool. Mixed income communities. And I figure that, we live in mixed income communities already. Social housing, even in the city of London, social housing, and even whatever co ops are left, are in mixed income communities. See, London, they had the perfect opportunity. When the federal government says they're going to start, you know, funding money to cities, and you have to have uh, so many started units, and then you meet that target, and then the federal government gives you some more money. There's a piece of land in the east end of the city. Once was the psychiatric hospital. That land is large enough to add 10 streets to the city. City sold it to developers. To the developers who are not building affordability for low income, middle income families. They're building for profit, condo high rises, condo townhomes, single family homes. Nothing's earmarked for any co op housing on that property. A little over 2,000 people are homeless in the city. It's not something they started 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we had homeless, and every year the homeless population increases. Yes, they are working on some housing, but not at the pace that they should be. They tore down an old hospital and they built on that property, but it's at 80% of market rate. Most of the units there for a one bedroom, because it's only 80% of the market rate, is anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400 a month. Some of the units are market rate. But then across the street was once the children's hospital. They're renovating that as housing and supportive housing. And there's a couple other places around the city where they're re-renovating some property for supportive housing. There's no new builds of social housing, and there's no new builds of co-ops. The Paris model, redeveloping major sites, requiring affordable units, embedding affordable housing in high-value areas. We only know the recommendations that appear in the summaries of the book. Berlin co-ops, Finland housing first, Paris inclusionary redevelopment, modular and small-scale infill, Singapore's public housing model. From these, the Berlin co-op model is the strongest match for deep affordability. Now, I try to find out, how many co-ops do we have left in the city? I mean, I could go out and drive around and find them. There's not many. The townhomes that once were townhomes are now condos, condo townhomes. Social housing, well, they still exist from the 70s. Um, a lot of well, most of them, or if not all of them, need upgrades. But we still need to build more of them. And co-ops are so important too, because even for middle income families, they can't afford to buy a home. Here in the city of London, you'd have to be making between 140,000 to 150,000 a year to be able to afford to buy something. City of Toronto, you'd have to be making 250,000 and more yearly to be able to afford to buy something. And this is why it's so important that, with co-ops, the rents are geared to 30% of your income. And as it stands right now, people are spending 45 to 50%. In some cases, may even be higher of their income on rent. On average, starting one bedroom here in London is $1,750 a month. Average start of a one bedroom. If you're getting ODSP, which is the Ontario Disability um, Support Program, single person's getting $733 a month. If you're on OW, which is Ontario Works, which once was called welfare, single person is getting about $650 a month. You're not going to rent. You're not going to rent anywhere. The wait list for public housing, they say it's 7 years, and they've been saying it's 7 years for a while now, and it's probably closer to 10 years, a waiting list for public housing. Co-op housing, might as well forget it. You're not going to find anything. When they talk about a living wage, and they say the living wage here in the city of London is $21.05. They say that's a living wage. Even at that, you're not going to afford a one bedroom at $1,750 a month. They say the living wage in Toronto is $27 an hour. Their rents, and in some cases, one bedrooms are over $2,000 to $2,500 a month for a one bedroom. So what the deep affordability actually means, deep affordability equals 30% of income, not 80% of market rent, not below market, not attainable, 30% of income. The ODSP shelter allowance runs anywhere from $522 to $733. Minimum wage take home, $2,400 a month. Average one bedroom, $1,600 to $2,000. If rent is $2,000 and your income is $733 a month, homelessness isn't a personal failure. It's not a personal failure anyways. This is why deeply affordable housing is the core of any real solution. So back to the Berlin co-ops provide permanently affordable housing. Rents are not tied to market. Co-op makes up 12% of Berlin's rental stock. They stabilize entire neighborhoods. They protect low income and middle income households. They scale fast when governments support them. And with the housing first model, the housing first supportive housing, this is the Finland model. They provide deeply affordable units. They offer supports on site, ends chronic homelessness, reduces ER visits, reduces policing, and the shelter use. Works for people with the lowest incomes and the highest needs. The housing first. The book gives us three pathways to deep affordability: co ops, housing first, and public land development. And governments have implemented none of them. The only data set with numbers is the housing mix strategy. Private housing, 94.5% of Canada's housing stock. Social housing, public and nonprofit plus co ops, 5.5% of Canada's housing stock. Berlin's is at 12%. This 5.5% is national. It includes the public housing, nonprofit, and co op. It doesn't separate them. It doesn't break them down. So out of the co-op separately, it doesn't provide Ontario specific percentages. And Ontario does not track the co-op housing stock. It doesn't track the co-op wait list, co-op unit loss, co-op unit creation, co-op funding gaps, co-op land availability, co-op pipeline projects, co-op affordability levels. Government doesn't track it. And why co-ops are invisible in Ontario's data? Co-ops don't make developers money. They don't generate profit. They don't produce dividends. They don't fuel speculation. They don't create donor networks. Co-ops don't fit the province's market first ideology. Ontario's housing policy is built on private developers, private financing, private profit, private supply pipelines. Co-ops break that model. And tracking co-ops would expose how little the province builds. Now, if Ontario tracked the co-ops, the public would see near zero growth, aging stock, massive unmet demand, decades of underinvestment. Tracking co-ops would force the province to set targets, and targets create accountability. Accountability creates pressure. Pressure creates political risk. Co-op empowers in communities, not corporations. And that shift powers away from the province's preferred stakeholders. Modular housing, slow building. And then when it comes to the winter response on homelessness, Well, the last remaining part of 2025 and 2024, the City of London didn't have a winter response for homelessness. This year is really no better. They decided that 60 little units is feasible for a homeless response. Placed on industrial land, which will be used for industrial. It'll have hydro, it'll have lighting, it'll have heat. "24-hour warming centers only when the temperatures drop to -15. I think between all the uh, shelters, the arcade mission services, the mission services, and a couple other shelters, women's shelters. I believe that there's a total of 600 or about 600 beds combined, with a little over 2,000 homeless. That still leaves 1,300 people out in the cold. And then these micro units they're putting on industrial land for a winter response are only 60. So that still leaves what 1,240 people out in the cold. Now, this winter, the first time in a long time. I mean, it started snowing in the middle of November. Got our first snowfall, and then more in December. Last week we had a major ice storm, and then we had a blizzard after that. Last night, New Year's Eve, snow blowing in, whiteout conditions. Now we still, approximately 1,300 people are out in these elements every single day. And the unfortunate thing, not just here in the city, major cities, the city of Toronto has the highest homeless population in the entire province. Just the city of Toronto alone, 16,000 people are homeless in the city of Toronto. That is not the metropolitan area, just the city itself. What one of the most expensive cities to live in. Vancouver, I would say, is the most expensive. Then Toronto. Vancouver, the Lower East End, Hastings, Hastings area, still is the epicenter of drug use and overdoses. I think it was around 2011. The Vancouver Police Department put together a documentary called Through a Blue Lens to raise awareness of mental health and addiction and homelessness. It was really bad then. If you ever watched the documentary Through a Blue Lens, you can still find it on YouTube. It's only gotten worse. Now here we are, 2026, brand new year. The advocacy groups can wish and hope that the government, federal and provincial, step up and start funding the deeply affordable units that we need. It costs it costs more money per night for a shelter cot than it does to house them. On an average of $1,600 per cot per night. It costs more money with the ER visits. It costs more money with policing than it is to house them. Entire countrywide spending, the government spending money on homelessness. I'm not sure what that amount is. I'd have to look that up. Annually, it's cheaper to house them than it is to support them through shelters. See, the provincial government here in Ontario, the Premier, Doug Ford, he's got a big imagination. Canada, or here in Ontario, it runs right through from the border of the United States all the way to Quebec. Is the 401 highway. It's the busiest highway in North America. The Greater Toronto Area, the GTA, it's like heavily populated. Traffic flowing through that 401 through there. Gets really busy, slows down. His idea of solving that problem, he wants to build a 3-level tunnel under the highway. And that'll stretch for about 30 miles. At a cost of 100 billion. 100 billion. Ontario alone needs 708,000 deeply affordable housing units. At a cost of about 60 billion. Of the federal government splits half of that, 30 billion each. We could end homelessness in Ontario. I know that's not going to happen. The province is not going to drop $30 billion on housing. Social housing, co-op housing, they're just not going to drop that kind of money. Because that's not the government's agenda. They say they want to end homelessness in 10 years. They echoed that 10 years ago. And today it's far worse. The Hamilton mayor, Chatham mayor, all the other mayors calling on the provincial government to call a state of emergency on homelessness and addiction and mental health. And we know the province is not going to do that. The unfortunate thing, one of the unfortunate things here is that people are going to die this winter being out in the elements. And who do we blame for that? Who do we hold accountability? Who are we going to hold accountable for that? Our taxpayer, our tax money, federal tax, provincial tax, that's not the government's money. That's our money. We should be able to say how we want this money spent. Yeah, it goes to healthcare, goes to infrastructure. See, cities can't build housing. Property tax money is for the city to run to run the parks of recreations, road work, and any other infrastructure. We can't build housing without the money from our tax dollars from the federal and provincial government. We pay a provincial tax, we pay a federal tax, HST tax, and yet the province of Ontario is more than happy to drop $100 billion of our tax dollars. A highway tunnel under a highway. Not one level, not two levels, but three levels. We wouldn't have any homeless in this province of Ontario. The government would spend $60 billion. We have 80,000 homeless people in the province of Ontario. We are the largest province in all of Canada. And how do you fix this? Well, you can use the Berlin model, you can use the Paris model, and you can use the Finland model. That's how we can fix this. If you're into reading books, you can go. You can go on Amazon. That's where I got the book. He's Canadian, the writer, the author of this book. Our crumbling foundation. How we solve Canada's housing crisis. That's the name of the book. It's a really good read. That could be those 37 recommendations in this book can not only just help Canada, but can help the United States too, and other countries. But anyways, Happy New Year to the listeners that come out here today and all the listeners from around the world. If it's your first time, thank you for joining me. This is going to be a better year. I'm doing this. I'm feeling much better, and we're going to start pumping the shows out. So enjoy the rest of your day. It's quiet. This is like the first time. Like this is like the first time in weeks that I've seen actually blue sky. And all that snow that blew in throughout the day, yesterday and overnight. You need sunglasses on today. Tell you that it's pretty bright. But get out there and I don't know. Maybe you have to nurse a hangover today. I don't know. I don't have a hangover today, so it didn't do. than do all that drinking, that's for sure. So stay, yeah, just get out there and enjoy the day. It's a day off. If you got snow where you live, take the kids tobogganing. Maybe take them ice skating. If the snow is packing enough, go out there and make a snowman with them. But just go out there and have some fun. Enjoy your day. Happy New Year. This is the North Affair Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Take care, everybody, and thank you for listening.